Hey everyone, my guest today is Spencer Garrett. Spencer Garrett is a third generation actor whose career spans 30 years in film, television, and theater. Some of his film credits include Public Enemies, Black Hat, Air Force One, Charlie Wilson's War, Thank You for Smoking, The Way, Lovely and Amazing, Bombshell, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Iron Man 3, Transformers 2, and many, many more. His many theater credits include Roots and Wings, In the Moonlight, Eddie, Alone Together, Gunplay, and many, many more. He received a Dramalogue Award for his work in the world premiere of Heartbreak at the Hudson Guild. Spencer is also a frequent contributor to Los Angeles' renowned World Theater. Recently, he starred in Windfall at the Bay Street Theater in Sag Harbor, directed by Jason Alexander. He's had over 150 major guest or recurring roles in television, but currently Spencer can be seen as legendary Lakers broadcaster Chick Hearn in Adam McKay's Winning Time for HBO, and he just completed principal photography on The Residence, a limited series for Shonda Rhimes. I also want to say that Spencer is the son of former SAG president and multi-hyphenate actress activist Kathleen Nolan. She was known for the Real Mc Coys and Peter Pan on Broadway. He's the grandson of actors Clara Kennedy and Stephen Ellsworth. They plied their trades on the famed Goldenrod Showboat Theatre on the Mississippi River. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that for half an hour. Anyway, this man has had acting in his bones since he was teeny tiny, but he's also been a friend of mine for as many decades as I have read all of those credits. And finally, we meet again, Spencer Garrett.
We meet again. Hello, my dear. What a treat.
Hi.
What a treat.
I
And
know.
I have to say, it's an honor to be with you, my old friend. And also, this has been sort of a bucket list, of mine to be on here with you because I'm in august company with all of the people that you've interviewed. And so I'm honored to sit here with you and jabber away for a little while.
I'm so happy, and it's all about timing, and here we are.
Yeah.
Um, what do they say? We saved the best for episode 432.
432. Oh my God.
That's
Well,
a
yes,
lot.
you saved one of the best, hopefully.
Yes, we
But I
gotta
mean,
keep
my
people
God, I was looking
interested.
at I was when I was texting you the other day, I was in Los Angeles and I just did a deep little known facts dive and went back and listened to some of my favorites with Danny Burstein and Allison Janney. And I mean, we have so many mutual friends in common, but um, looking back on a lot of the folks that you've talked to, who are some of my favorite actors and artists and creators of all time. So it's really lovely to be, on your list.
Well, it's an amazing thing. Your body of work is so, um, what's the word I want to use? Like,
The large body.
it's a
Big fat
large body
body.
of work. It's really amazing to sort of, because you're my friend, I'm not researching you, right? And so suddenly to kind of take in how much work you've been doing, it's really, I'm so proud of you. That's what I want to
Thank
say. I'm so
Wow,
proud of
thank you.
you.
Thank you.
But let's
Thank
go back because
And one
it's,
of those pieces, I'm happy to say, one of the things that you read in that sort of laundry list of things, I'm looking, thinking back and going, my God, I feel old. But one of the things, Gunplay, which is I think the only time you and I have been on a
yeah,
stage together, that wonderful piece for Naked Angels with Bradley Whitford, one of the Issues projects with Naked Angels back in 2000, somewhere around there, late 90s, 2000. But that was a terrific piece.
yeah.
But we got to be on stage together, and that
We
was
did, which was
yeah,
so fun. I'm terrible with time, but I think it might have been that night or another night in those evenings. That's
mm-hmm.
where I first met Steven Weber,
Oh
one of
wow,
your great, great pals.
yeah,
So many people, when we brought Naked Angels to LA, it was really a chance for us to kind of connect the dots between the two coasts.
sure.
And that was nothing but fun.
Yeah.
And so, but I want to go back even further than 2000, because I
Can we
just
just talk
read.
about for a second, really quick, the fact that you and I were at Fordham together at the same time, but we never met, which is bonkers to me. And John Hickey.
But were you? I don't. But you weren't a theater major. That's
No,
why.
no, no. I had a long trajectory. I was on the 7-year plan. I started out at Duke University in North Carolina, took a detour, went to DC, lived in DC for 3 years, and then I did my last year at Fordham, and I was there from 86 to 87. And I think you graduated the year before. And I think Hickey, did you graduate 86?
I graduated. Well, Hickey graduated before me.
Yeah.
I 87, I think. And also Matt McGrath was
Matt,
there. Did you
right?
know Matt?
I mean, I met him years later, but we didn't. I wasn't in the theater program. I was just.
Okay.
I was
I
just.
don't want to get in. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to
yeah.
get in the weeds
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
Fordham because, but go Rams, absolutely,
Go
100%.
Yes.
But I want to go back because your mom is a treasure, a national treasure.
Mm.
I also didn't mention, your father, with whom I don't know that you grew up in the same house as your dad, but he was an agent, and also in the industry, as
Yeah.
it were,
Mhm.
and your grandparents. So truly, like, you are such you're such a nepo baby in the best sense of the word. But tell me about where you grew up, who was in the house you grew up in, how much time did you spend on the famed Mississippi River? And just talk about childhood in the world of artists.
Well, I didn't spend any time on the Mississippi River, but my grandparents ran a theater on the Goldenrod Showboat. This sounds almost hokey, like you can't make it up. But there was a showboat back in the days when there were showboats with the paddle wheel and the whole thing out of Showboat, the musical. And it was docked in St. Louis, and there was a theater on the boat. And my grandparents and my mom and my aunt, who was also an actress, Nancy Devlin, and they did shows on the theater on the showboat. And the boat would go up and down the Mississippi River and stop in little towns along the way, Joplin, Hannibal, St. Joe. And the people from the town would come onto the boat and watch the plays, and then the boat would sail on down to the next town. And somewhere around in my mom's teens, she decided to light out for New York City. She came here and started studying at the Neighborhood Playhouse with Sandy Meisner, and eventually got cast in Peter Pan and did a lot of live television. And then eventually my grandparents moved to New York as well. They followed her here, and they all lived here. And so my grandparents, my mom, my aunt all started out early days in live television and theater in New York in the 50s and 60s. And then mom moved out to LA, got the Real Mc Coys, and several years later, she was always very politically active, and then she became president of SAG, the first woman president of SAG. So it's a legacy that I'm very proud to say I'm a third generation actor in the world's second oldest profession.
When you when your mom was sort of in the heyday of her television success,
Yeah.
was that uh, because I'm terrible with dates, as you could see, putting me on the spot, like, when did I go to college? What I could tell you what decade, just not what year. Were you born when she was still working in television?
Oh, sure. I was born. In fact, she was on a show called The Real Mc Coys for 6 or 7 years. It was a top 10 show, and with Richard Crenna and Walter Brennan, the wonderful character actor Walter Brennan. And she actually left the show in order to have me. She met my dad in '62, and she had sort of run her course on the show. She was Kate McCoy, Sugar Babe, and she left to have me. And then she went on. She did another series after that called Broadside, and 800 television shows and films after that. So she was always working. I mean, I grew up in green rooms and backstages on sets and in regional theaters around the country. She'd be on the road doing Unsinkable Molly Brown in Atlanta, or Ready When You Are, CB. Like, she was doing all these shows and hundreds and hundreds of television shows, Rockford Files, Magnum PI. And so I just followed her around. My parents split up when I was a year old. So they remained friends for a long time. So he wasn't in the house. I didn't grow up with him, but he was around, and a terrific agent. He represented he represented Donald Pleasance and Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave, and he had a lot of wonderful actors in his little boutique agency that he ran for a long time. So,
and when you think back to being a kid, so you were raised in Hollywood or New York or
in
both?
Los Angeles primarily, in LA. And then when I was from 4 to 7, we moved here, and Mom was doing South Pacific at Jones Beach, and then she did a couple of plays here in New York, and then we literally went back and forth between New York and LA for kind of the first, I'd say, 12, 13 years of my life. It was back and forth and back and forth. Wherever the work was for her, she would follow it. And so we kind of bopped back and forth across the country, and then kind of settled back in LA when I was about 14.
So how was it for you as a kid bopping around with a
Mm-hmm.
single mom at a time where most people didn't have single moms and weren't bopping around like gypsies?
Yeah.
So tell me about like you socially and making friends and sort of how you handled being, like living out of suitcases a lot of the time.
I think it was all I knew. So I think I was kind of forced to make friends, and I was kind of good at it when I was a little kid. I had a terrific group of friends in all different. I was friends with the jocks and with the theater nerds and the geeks, and when I was in elementary school and junior high school in LA, and I remember I was in elementary school in first grade in LA, and then came here and went to PS6 for 2 years for second and third grade, and then back in LA. So I was either going to be a sort of a loner kid, or I was going to be social and make friends. And I think I just had a knack for it, I guess, fortunately, because it would have been very easy to kind of isolate. But I was also surrounded by very vibrant and alive and interesting grown-ups.
Right.
So I was kind of like, I think I was kind of 42 years old when I was born. There's lots of pictures of me at the Dakota apartment with lots of people. I was this tiny little person, and then there's lots of people holding martinis and cigarettes. And so I was friends with those people too. So I was forced to grow up very fast, I think is what I'm trying to say.
And right, like this really present showbiz kid, like just being in the world. And I would say when I think of you now, like your ability to kind of make friends and keep friends is so obvious to anybody who knows you or follows you on Instagram, right? Like you have had these unbelievably long-standing, loyal, beautiful friendships for decades and decades and decades. And
yeah, I'm proud of that.
you should be proud of that. It's life is really busy, and what I've learned from you is, and you make time, you prioritize the people that you love, and it works, but it is work as well. When did you start? A lot of people who grow up in a household with people who are really successful at what they do will often shy away from it. And then some people run towards it. When did you start? First of all, did you ever get asked as a kid to be a part of anything your mom was doing, and sort of, or were you more watching? And when did you start doing it?
I think I started, I remember being, we could go back to somewhere. There's a photograph of me, and I've been trying to find it for years. There's a photograph of me on opening night of Company in 1971, and I'm asleep on Elaine Stritch's couch in her dressing room, surrounded by her little Yorkie puppies. And it's Elaine Stritch and George Firth and my mom. And, and I remember I just remember that was the world that I grew up in. And it never felt unusual to me. It never felt odd to me. And I kind of sort of transferred that vibe through my life. I'm surrounded by all of these interesting, creative people. Why wouldn't I want to be interested to know them?
Yeah.
So it always kind of came naturally to me.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, wow, I want to do what they do. So when I was, my mom did a film called Limbo, which nobody really saw, but it was really the first film to tackle the Vietnam War. It was about wives of POWs in Vietnam, and it came out. It literally was released, I believe, like the day the POWs were first released from Vietnam. Wonderful cast. It was my mom and Kate Jackson, her first movie role, and I had a little small role in that. I was like an extra. I had one line, and I think they paid me $50 in cash, which I kept in my sock. And I remember being around all of these cameras and all of these creative, interesting people, and that's really when I first started to get that spark of oh, I think I might want to be a part of this. And then a couple of years after that, my mom was doing she was in the first class of the AFI Women Directors Workshop, and she directed a film with Diane Ladd and Martin Sheen, and Laura Dern and I we each had like a couple of lines in that, and so that was kind of my first speaking role in a thing, and I little by little I kind of got the sense of, oh, maybe this is my path too. It was always kind of unavoidable. I think I always felt like I always toyed with the idea of getting a real job, and I'm going to go put on a suit and carry a briefcase and have do something real for a living. But every time I was a part of something that was so alive and interesting, it just kept luring me back. So
What would you say? Because I think about like,
does that make sense?
100%. And I just think about like it with everyone I talk to who has stayed in this industry in whatever lane they're traveling down
Yeah.
it. For most people, it takes a minute to get beyond the guest star and the maybe a recurring, which is the greatest feeling in the world, and sort of the just the step by step of getting into the thing. And I know when we were all starting out, like, by the way, getting a small part, even as, a 21-year-old, one
Sure.
line in a movie would have been thrilling, right? And it was for us because of how much we love being on a set or a stage and just the community of it. Like for people like you and me, the reason it would be hard to put on a suit every day and go into like an office by ourselves is
Yeah.
because we love the energy and thrive on that sort of community building spirit of the
Mm-hmm.
making of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think?
Can I tell you something though?
Yeah.
It's still thrilling to me. The thrill of my memory, my little 6 or 7 year old memory of being on Elaine Stritch's couch at the opening night of Company. I remember that experience, and I remember every time I walked onto one of my mom's sets, or uh, being on the Western Town when she was doing Gunsmoke or whatever on the back lot of Universal Studios. I still get the same every time I drive on, even 61 years old. I still get the same buzz when I pull onto the Warner Brothers lot and see the water tower, or at Paramount, and I'm pulling onto the lot and I've got my little parking spot, and I think, oh my gosh, look what I get to do for a living. Look what I get to do today. I get to act today. Like I still have that same childlike thing, that sense of wonder that I remember having when I was a little kid, and following my mom around and watching her put on her makeup in the dressing room and all that. It never gets old for me. I still think, oh God, I'm the luckiest bastard in the world to get to do this.
And also when you think back to all those years of auditioning on those lots where you weren't allowed to park anywhere
Yeah.
near.
Yeah.
And if you're
You're
lucky
going to
and
be
you
in
were
lot
wearing
C, and then you're going to walk half a mile. Sure. Yeah.
carrying a
Which
piece of paper.
still happens too, by the way.
Well, I think people would be interested to know that even with, parking spots that have your name on them for
Yeah.
these various shows, which is really a significant feeling of having made it for someone who really started out auditioning in these places. What is your relationship to auditioning?
I like it. Um, and I think I used to be really good at it. Like I gave good room. And I love the idea of coming into the room with all the people. I mean, we're talking about a bygone era now, sadly. But I fed off the energy in the room, whether it was 2 people sitting on the couch or 19 people sitting in a room. I just got the juice off of that, and I was good at it. Now with the self-tape thing, it's a totally different beast. And listen, I'm still trying to get the hang of this acting thing. I feel like I'm still trying to get good at it. But now I really, really miss the rooms. And now with the self-tape thing, I'm trying to, I think my challenge now, and I think maybe for a lot of us, is I try not to overthink. You can do 27 takes if you want to. And I'm trying to avoid that. I'm not trying to overthink what I'm doing. Just kind of go in and I'm pretending that I'm in the room and I'm just doing 1 or 2 takes and then I'm getting out, because then otherwise you can overthink it to death. So
Right.
yeah, it's a different thing. But I like auditioning. I don't mind auditioning. I love it, and I'm good at it. But I really, really miss human beings. And also the relationships with the casting people that, I mean, if you cultivate, and that's part of our business is relationships and cultivating relationships. And I think I was good at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember the old Building 140 at Warner Brothers, which was like, they were all down a hallway. And so you'd do your audition for ER and then you'd stick your head in and say,
Right.
hi.
And say hi to everybody.
Sure. Hi, this is me. This is what I look like in 3D. And remember me,
Yeah.
for next time. That never ends. I mean, I feel like you're always trying to, maintain those relationships, but we don't have that anymore. I think the last time I saw a casting director in person, possibly, was for, well, actually I saw David Rubin a few weeks ago over Zoom, which was thrilling, because I was like, oh, I'm getting to interact with you and you're giving me notes and I'm actually getting feedback. But I think the last time before that was 2020,
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
pandemic.
Absolutely.
And it's still, it sticks in my craw a little bit. It's a tricky subject for me, because I love the interpersonality. I love the relationships, and we don't have it anymore.
I know. And it's funny because when I talk to casting directors, many of whom have come on the show,
Mm-hmm.
they miss it too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, I miss you and you miss me, but it's a whole new budgeting structure. And, it also is about directors and producers feeling like, this is great. I can be home and you guys can just keep
Yeah.
sending me all these tapes. But I do know that for certain, certain casting people in New York are starting to try to do that, especially in theater. But it's surprising to me how much theater we still audition on tape for. And everyone's here in New
Yeah.
York,
I'm
So
doing one today. I'm doing one this afternoon. And happily so. I'm just the fact that I'm getting a crack at something. I'm thrilled.
absolutely. But
Being a crack as you crack the door.
right, but it's like, well, I'm cracking open the door because whenever my dog hears particular voices, she likes to come join us. And you have just won the Lola Likes Your Voice Award. It
Oh my
doesn't
God.
always happen.
Hi, Lola.
What was the thing that you feel like, if this podcast was called My Lucky Break? Because I feel like we have many of them, and it's really hard, like it's stepping stones, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you had to go like, all right, my lucky break was the reason I think I have established myself and keep going is because of, what do you think that might be?
Oh gosh, I feel like every job is my lucky break. I mean, 5 years ago with Tarantino, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that was one in a series of, because you do a job, as you know, you get your name on a parking spot and you do the gig, and then you're back to one, and sometimes you're back to window E at the unemployment line. So I never take anything for granted. I never think anything is, oh gosh, I've arrived, because if you start getting in that headspace, you're screwed. So I think if I could point to one particular moment, it would be, and I talk about this a lot, but it's really true. I had been kind of cast as the same type of person for a long time. I'd kind of been in this little box of, I call them pricks in a suit. And I got a lot of pricks in a suit for a long time. Lawyers and senators and congressmen and sort of, callow, smarmy, slick, played a lot of different things, but that was kind of my bread and butter for a long time. And it was fine. And I was making an okay living, but it was kind of boring. And I had never really gotten anything that sort of challenged me. And I went in to read for Bonnie Timmerman for this movie, Public Enemies, for Michael Mann. And she was bring me in to read for the role of this kind of punchy ex-boxer who was a getaway car driver and a marksman, and like so completely outside of what I had been. It was a character part. It was a really, really wonderful character part. And I remember going up to her and saying at the audition, and I remember going up to her and saying, it was my first time meeting her. And if those listening, you know who Bonnie Timmerman is. I mean, she's had this kind of wonderful storied career as a casting person. And it was thrilling to meet her. And it was Michael Mann, one of my directing heroes. And I said, can I read for the lawyer? Can I read for the FBI agent? I was thinking safe. Can I read for the safe part that I know I'm going to get because it's the one that I've been doing for the last 25 years? And she said, you know why I brought you in? She said, because I've been watching you do those guys for a long time, and I'm bringing you in because I want you to stretch. And so she was giving me a gift in that moment. And she said, you could read for lawyer number 3 and you'll probably get it and you'll probably be bored out of your mind. But she said, if you want to do something interesting, come back tomorrow and read this role that I brought you in to audition for. So she gave me a chance. I came back the next day and I read for this character role that was outside of my comfort zone, and I got it. And so that became a relationship with Michael Mann and with Bonnie, and I've since done 3 other projects with Michael. That was a turning point for me. That was kind of a way out of what I'd been doing before and a way forward to thinking, okay, I've kind of broken through this pattern of playing these certain types of guys, and now it's time to start spreading my wings a little bit. And then I think there was another thing that I can, around the same time, I got cast in a production of The Real Thing. And it was, I was going through a difficult relationship at the time. And if you know the play, it's kind of the coupled husband, and he finds out that that his wife's been cheating on him, blah blah blah. And I had to break down on stage every night, and I hadn't been able to access that kind of emotional center in my work before then. I just hadn't been able to go there. I'd been in all kinds of acting classes, and I got into this play, and whatever I was going through in my life at the time, I was able to access that. This sounds really actory. I'm sorry. It sounds really, but I mean,
don't worry, I'll cut it all out.
I'll cut it all out. But I was able to go on stage every night and dig deeper than I'd ever been able to dig before. And I had a kind of a wonderful breakthrough during the production of The Real Thing at this International City Theater in Long Beach, California, which is not exactly it's not the West End, it's not Broadway, but it was one of my favorite plays and a wonderful role. And I got to exercise some demons and get some things out of my system. And I found a place in my work that I wasn't able to get to before. And that became something in my toolbox that I was able to use. And so those 2 things I kind of point to as sort of nice turning points where I was able to make breakthroughs in my work, and it gave me opportunities to do other things that outside of my comfort zone.
Right. Can you talk about, I mean, you've also worked with Mike Nichols, so can you talk about that experience and meeting him? Was there an audition? What the project was?
Yeah, it was Charlie Wilson's War. I mean, who wasn't a huge Mike Nichols fan. I'd seen everything he'd ever done. Not everything he'd ever done, but I mean, not the seminal early stuff on Broadway, obviously, but massive fan. Ellen Lewis, the great casting director, Ellen Lewis. It was at Paramount. Sit down. She brought me in. I sat down on a couch opposite him, and he said, "I just want to talk to you." And we just talked. I just want to get to know you. I don't even remember reading. It was a smallish role. It was a congressman, but it was a fun several scenes opposite Tom Hanks. And I don't think we even read. I think we just talked. And at one point, we had a mutual friend, Bob Willoughby, who, if you Google him, he's a wonderful set photographer who shot all of Mike Nichols' films, and kind of a legendary photographer. And so Bob shot The Graduate and Catch-22 and Carnal Knowledge. And so I brought up Bob's name in our conversation, and he just lit up, and we started talking about that. And so that was my kind of icebreaker way in with Mike, Mr. Nichols. And we had a lovely half-hour conversation. And then a few days later, I got the job, and I'm sitting there on the set, with Julia Roberts and Tom Hanks and John Slattery and Dennis O'Hare, lots of other people we know, and that was the kind of period in my life where I thought I finally got invited to sit at the grown-ups table, and I'd gotten several gigs in a row where I was invited to sit at the grown-ups table, and I remember having Bob Willoughby send me his book of photographs. He has a great book called The Platinum Years, and he sent me, and he inscribed his copy to Mike, sitting in Video Village in a chair opposite Mike Nichols and watching him flip through the pages, looking at the rehearsal process with Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft and Jack Nicholson and Art Garfunkel. And he's telling these stories. And that's the shit that I just live for. I mean, watching Mike Nichols tell stories about the making of his movies, everything stopped. Everything shut down, and everybody's gathered around in a circle watching him flip through these pages of these photographs. And I was just in heaven.
Right.
I mean,
it's the dream.
it could have all ended right there. And I just would have thought, yeah.
And what about, another part where I felt like someone gave you space to do something really fun and different was in the Tarantino movie.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know Quentin Tarantino before?
No. Again, it was Victoria Thomas, the casting director, and there was no script to read, obviously. Ultimately, there was, and after I got the role, and I didn't even know what part in the movie that scene was going to be. All I knew is it was a Tarantino movie, and I wanted to be a part of it. And I read with Victoria Thomas, and the role was this kind of 1960s entertainment TV interviewer guy, and I just said, "Oh, I can do this." If there's anything in my wheelhouse. And I went in and I read with her, and she sort of directed me, and she directed me much in the way that it ends up in the movie, where I'm kind of like turned around, and then I spin around in my chair and I face the camera. And I walked out of that room and I thought, well, if I don't get this, then I'm just going to go sell shoes in Nebraska. I mean, it just felt so right. But again, that was a relationship with a casting director who's been a champion of mine, and she kind of whispered and kind of winked at me as I walked out. Like there was just a glimmer of kind of like,
I'll see you on the set.
I'll see you on the set. But I didn't know Quentin until I met him. I walked onto the set a couple months later. The first time I met him was walking onto the set with Brad and Leo, and the whole thing lasted in my costume, and the whole thing lasted about an hour and a half. And I had a 6 a.m. call, and I was back in my car driving down the 5 freeway at 9:30 in the morning, thinking, what just happened?
Did I just do that?
Yeah. And he was terrific, and he knew my career better than I did. I mean, he's an encyclopedia of everything. So that was a treat. I mean, that was just a treat.
Well, to me, when I think about, like, if you
the biggest compliment that he paid me was, he said, when I looked at your tape from Victoria, he said, I cast you and I felt like I was bringing you down from a spaceship in 1969 and plopping you down into my movie. It's like I brought you out of a time capsule.
That's great.
So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, also, I was just going to say, like, if you took a pencil and like made an arrow from that to Chick Hearn, you know, if you know, we're filming and recording audio right now, but if someone were to watch this on the YouTube channel, I don't think they'd be like, oh my God, he looks exactly like Chick Hearn. So the work they do on that show to make you look really like this person. I mean, I know that you can do the voice and you could do all the other things, but you couldn't change your face on your own. When you went in to read for this, were you saddled with like, shit, I don't look like, a lot of times you look like the guy and you feel like there's an edge when you do. How did you sort of handle that part of the getting the part experience?
I went in, Francine Maisler, thank you, Francine Maisler. I went in looking as much like, I mean, I went out and found a plaid polyester suit and a big fat wide polyester tie that if you lit a match around me, I would have gone up in flames. I mean, I was just a chemical in a suit. And but
did you get a wig or a hairpiece?
I didn't get a wig or a hairpiece, but I did my hair like him, and I looked, just in terms of the outfit, as much like that era as I could. And then I watched on YouTube, I watched tons and tons of Chick Hearn video to get the sound right and the voice right and all of that. And so when I went in there, I thought, well, I'm about 90% there. I just don't have his face. He had this long kind of beaky nose and big ears and giant head of hair, the big chin. And I thought, well, if I get this, and interestingly enough, so I ended up getting the gig, and they were going to, I was just going to be me. I was just going to be me. And I went to Adam McKay and I said, can we do something prosthetically? Can we do like a nose or something just to get me more in the headspace? And it turns out we ended up doing an entire prosthetic process with, it was about 2.5 hours every morning with the nose and the chin and the all of it. And it was like, I got to sit there and watch my face morph into Chick Hearn's face every morning for 3 years. But that wasn't the initial plan, was just for me to, have Spencer's face. But I kind of asked for it and they were like, sure, and let's do it. And that really
and then by year 2, you're like, listen, remember I said can I just wear like a Ronald McDonald mask and just
I absolutely loved it. I loved it. 5 in the morning, sitting there, a cup of coffee, reading my sides, watching them put this face on, and then you're the guy, and then your work is half done for you. So when I walked onto the set, I was more
How
prepared.
does it work? How does it work? We see what looks like a real basketball game being played and announcers watching the game in real time. Can you take us a little behind the scenes of the making of the show?
Just extraordinary, lots and lots of moving parts. We shot on a soundstage. Several sound stages at Warner Brothers. We shot. They recreated the Forum, the iconic Forum where the Lakers played in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. A lot of green screen, and then they would fill in behind me with about 500 extras, and then the rest of it was green screen. And then there was the actual basketball court, the actual parquet basketball court, and you had cameramen on rollerblades going up and down the court, following these guys up and down. And several of the actors were legit terrific basketball players. Quincy Isaiah, I think who played Magic Johnson, was like 6'3". So all of these guys, Adrian Brody, they were all obviously significantly shorter than their real life counterparts.
Right.
And so a lot of them were on these kind of Herman Munster giant shoes that they walked on. And those were you didn't see those on camera. So it was like they were running up and down the court. And then when you see Dr. J or Magic flying through the air with a slam dunk, the camera's on Quincy's face, and then it'll be like a body double. There was one guy who was this incredible, like his entire thing that he does for a living, he's a basketball dunker. And that's what he does. And he does exhibitions all around the world. And so he was like the go-to guy. They had several basketball players that could actually do But they taught Quincy. They taught Quincy how to run and throw and pass like magic. Wonderful actor Solomon Hughes, who played Kareem, was an actual. He played in Italy, and he played for the Harlem Globetrotters. They were all terrific basketball players. So I had a front row seat too. I mean, I sat and watched great basketball being played all day long. And then when they turned the camera around on me, because I had such enormous amounts of dialogue, they had a lot of my dialogue out on these giant cue cards, and it would go back and forth on a dolly track. So it was just a blast. It was a dream job. I wish we were still doing it. I wish we had a chance to finish the story. We got canceled after the second season. The strike kind of knocked the wind out of our sails, and we didn't get to finish it. But it was one of the greatest joys I've ever had as an actor.
Right, because not only did you get to do this iconic part on this iconic show with the great Adam McKay and Sally Field and I mean, the cast, John
Adrian
C.Reilly
Brody,
goes
Jason
on and on.
Segel, on and
Yeah.
on and on. I mean, amazing.
But you also got to do the thing that is really a dream, which is to play a character over, over years, right? Like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
get to know them. It's not walking in for one day on,
Yeah.
a Quentin Tarantino set. Like
Yeah.
it's okay. Like you don't have to know everything about them the first day. You can learn them like we do in life when we learn ourselves going through. And that must have been, aside from the parking spot and all of those amazing people and the prosthetics, I'm going to switch gears right now in such a huge way because as listeners have heard, I've known Spencer for a really long time, and I want to tell a story about Spencer because, well, there's two stories I want to tell, but this is about Spencer, not about me. Spencer came to my wedding, and that is now 22 years ago.
Oh,
Believe
golly.
it or not.
Wow.
And that's a number I do know. And he came to the rehearsal dinner, and at the end of the night, everyone's going home, and my adorable Irish friend Spencer Garrett is weeping on my shoulder because he felt like he would never
You're gonna make me
find
cry now.
someone to really partner with in all the ways. I mean, Spencer's had a lot of wonderful girlfriends over the years, but like a partnership with someone who he felt he matched and someone who matched him in all the ways that are important when you're having a really grown-up relationship. And he had some idea that that was about to happen for me and Dominic. And when I think back to how young I was then, like I'm in a different relationship now, but I understood. It felt like there was some magic in the room that night, and there was. And I just want to bring up, and I hope it's okay, that Spencer is in a relationship with a national, maybe an international treasure, Dana Bash, this incredible CNN news reporter, journalist, a woman who has so much integrity and intellectual power and an ability to sit in really difficult situations. And she never breaks a sweat, even though I know she's a human being and inside is dealing with all the feelings we deal with under very high pressure jobs. And the idea to me that sometimes you just have to wait to find the person. If you're about to tell me that you guys just broke up, I'm going to kill
I was just
myself.
gonna say, this is really awkward. This is can we cut
And
this?
it
Yeah.
doesn't
No,
even
two
matter.
days ago. I'm still
And you know what? This is an evergreen podcast, and life turns into all sorts of things, and we can't predict the future. But if the past is a precedent for the future, we have great faith. So I just wanted to shout out the great Dana Bash, obviously.
you're very sweet.
Can't wait to read her book. But also it's brought you, one of my first jobs was this series with Altman called Tanner,
Oh,
and
sure.
we were really completely enmeshed in the world of politics, which is just so different and so the same in certain ways as the Hollywood and entertainment industry. But I wonder now, as someone who now has a front seat to a whole other world, not just the pretend world of being, Chick Hearn, but like seeing Washington. And I just wonder if that has just been a crazy value add to your life in terms
Sure.
of not just love, but
Yeah.
just intellectual stimulation and world interest.
I've always been I lived in DC for 3 years, but I've always been
Right.
a political junkie. I love political shows, political podcasts. I mean, like I said, I was 42 years old when I was born. So I was born with a copy of The Economist under my arm and with a Wall Street Journal. No, I've always been fascinated with that world, and I loved Washington when I lived there, and now I'm there every 3 weeks for the last 11 and a half years, and I get to meet and rub elbows with a lot of people that I really, really admire, particularly in the journalism sphere. That's been a great bonus to my life as well. I mean, she's extraordinary. She's just absolutely. I wake up every day knowing that I'm punching above my weight in every regard. She's a badass and one of the great journalists, and it's been amazing to watch her grow in her work. She was known when I met her, but to watch her grow and ascend in her career to the heights that she's gotten to, and she's respected and loved, and she's also just a really super nice person. She's a good, decent person. So I call her my first grown-up. She's my first grown-up, and I was lucky enough to meet her when I was around the time I was turning 50. And I think, 22 years ago when I was at your wedding, I was like, I'm just going to get a cat and move to the woods and smoke a pipe, and that's it. But no, when I met Dana, like everything kind of turned around. But I've also met people that I never thought that I would rub elbows with, like a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, as they say. I mean, I've met a lot of those folks too, and some very, very wonderful people that I wouldn't normally have come into contact with. And obviously, it's just a bananas time right now. It's a vastly different Washington, and it's a vastly different political world we're living in now than we were when I first met her. That I can't even wrap my brain around. So I'm on pins and needles about what's going to happen next week.
Yeah, because we're talking on October 31st, and
Yeah.
so we're just a few days from the 2024 presidential election. Is there anything you can tell me about my television crush, Wolf Blitzer, that'll just help me be really sure that that's been the right crush for a lifetime?
It has been the right crush. I have a crush on him. I want him to be my dad. Just the sweetest, menchiest, loveliest, kindest fellow you could ever meet. He's everything you want him to be in a Wolf Blitzer. That's all I can say. He and his wife Lynn are dear friends, and I'm just crazy about him. I mean, he's just a really, really good man, and he's obviously contributed so much to broadcast history. So,
right.
Yeah.
And our country's history. And well, I want to have Dana on. I have her book. I'm excited about her new book, and it would be really fun.
Yeah.
I know she's a little busy at the moment. We'll circle back to that. Okay. There's sort of another story that happened between me and Spencer, and I'm going to let you tell it.
No.
I did a Broadway musical called You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And at the time,
oh wait, time's up. I think we're running out of time.
At the time, we had a CD of the show. It was before people were streaming music, and I was visiting Los Angeles.
Were you staying with me? Were you staying in
I was visiting you, yeah.
Yeah.
And I brought you a present, I think, of the CD, which was, a very special present. And we put it on, and this is maybe the greatest moment of my life. And it might be hard for you to reenact it.
Yeah.
But what did you say to me as you were listening to me sing the Schroeder song, which I'm very famous for?
I can't remember. Oh, I knew this was gonna come up. I'm gonna start crying again, but for a different reason. We were listening to you singing the Schroeder song, and I turned to you and I said, "Oh my God, how did you get this job?" With a completely straight face, with no malice of
no irony,
no malice intended. I just was like, I was listening to you sing. I don't know why it came out of my mouth, and I'm going to take it to my grave, and it's going to it'll be on my headstone. Here lies Spencer Garrett. How did you get this job?
It
Yeah.
was so good because, by the way, every Broadway diva
And we're
who
still
had-
friends. And
we're still friends, and
still
every
like me.
Broadway diva who had auditioned for that role has had the same question ever since. But it made me so happy because
Oh,
A, we laughed so hard we peed ourselves,
you
and
didn't
B,
run out of the room. You didn't pack your
I hugged you
yeah.
because I ask myself that every day. And sometimes, the greatest jobs in the world make no sense in terms of why they happen, except sometimes life smiles on us in such an incredible way.
Yeah.
And ours is not to ask why, ours is just to sing, Do You Know Something, Schroeder?
Oh my God.
What is, other than that, we've
Mm.
just shared two great facts about you. What is a little known fact about Spencer Garrett that maybe I don't know 30 years later?
Oh golly. I'm a terrific dancer, and but not
You're a
I,
ballerina.
no, I'm not a bad, I'm a better dancer than people give me credit for, I think. And I don't get to dance nearly enough. Dana thinks I'm a terrible dancer, and I tend to disagree. She's a fantastic dancer. I've been to more weddings and bar mitzvahs in the last 11 and a half years with her than I will ever be in a lifetime. Lots and lots and lots of bar mitzvahs and weddings. And she's the first person up out of the chair to go on the dance floor and dance. And we dance. She doesn't think I'm a good dancer, and I think I'm a fantastic dancer. And my dream is to. So here's my little known fact. My dream is to dance in a Broadway musical. I don't know whether it will ever become fulfilled, but that's my dream. Is to show off my dancing wares on Broadway.
And I will be there. And the first thing I will ask you when I come backstage is,
How did you get this?
Spencer Garrett.